Teen disappears after sleepover. 7 years later, her diary appears in a library book. The town of Millfield, Connecticut, was the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked and everyone knew everyone else's business. With a population just under 15,000, it was small enough to feel safe but large enough to support 2 high schools, a community college, and a well-funded public library that was the pride of the county. Friday, June 4, 2010, was a perfect early summer evening. School had just let out for the year, and 16-year-old Jessica Turner was excited to spend the night at her best friend, Lily Montgomery's house. The girls had been inseparable since kindergarten. Jessica with her artistic flair and quiet confidence, Lily with her outgoing personality and contagious laugh. "Got everything?" asked Diane Turner as she watched her daughter pack an overnight bag. At 42, Diane was a single mother who worked as a nurse at Millfield General Hospital. She and Jessica had been on their own since Jessica's father walked out when she was 3. "Yes, Mom," Jessica replied, zipping up her bag. "We're just going to watch movies and talk about Ryan Peterson asking Lily to prom next year." "Home by noon tomorrow?" Diane confirmed, leaning against the doorframe. "Promise." Jessica hugged her mother tightly. Neither knew it would be the last time. The Montgomerys lived in a sprawling Victorian on the north side of town, a house that had been in Lily's family for generations. Jessica had spent countless nights there over the years, navigating the creaky staircases and hidden nooks that made the place feel like something from a storybook. Margaret Montgomery, Lily's mother, opened the door when Jessica arrived at 6:30 p.m. "Jessica, darling, Lily's upstairs setting up your usual spot. David picked up pizza for you girls. It's in the kitchen." David Montgomery was in his home office grading papers. He taught English at the community college and waved absently when Jessica passed. The family cat, Oliver, wound around her ankles as she climbed the stairs to Lily's bedroom. The evening proceeded normally. The girls ate pizza, painted each other's nails, and watched romantic comedies on Lily's laptop. They talked about their summer plans. Jessica had an internship at the local art gallery, while Lily was going to soccer camp for 3 weeks in July. At about 10:30 p.m., they heard a tapping on Lily's second-floor window. Outside on the wide branch of an oak tree that nearly touched the house sat Ryan Peterson and his friend Mike Collins. Both boys attended Millfield West High School with the girls and lived a few blocks away. "What are you doing here?" Lily hissed, opening the window but not letting them in. "We were bored," Ryan grinned. "Thought maybe you girls wanted to have some real fun." "My parents are home," Lily whispered. "If my dad catches you, he'll flip out." Jessica stayed back, always more cautious than her friend. In her diary later, she would write, "Ryan had that look again, the one that makes me nervous, like he's planning something no one else knows about." The 4 teenagers talked through the window for about 30 minutes. The boys had brought a flask of vodka stolen from Mike's parents' liquor cabinet, but the girls declined to drink any. Eventually, they made plans to meet the next morning at Ridge Point, a popular hangout spot overlooking the town. 11 o'clock, Ryan said before climbing back down the tree. "Don't flake on us." After the boys left, Lily turned to Jessica with excitement. "Ryan totally likes me. Did you see how he kept looking at me?" "I don't trust him," Jessica replied, chewing her bottom lip. "He seems, I don't know, like he's playing a game." "You're too suspicious of everyone," Lily laughed. "Not every guy is going to disappear like your dad." The comment stung, as Lily surely knew it would. Jessica was sensitive about her father's abandonment, though she rarely showed it. She simply nodded and changed the subject. At midnight, the girls finally settled down to sleep. Jessica, in her usual spot on the trundle bed, pulled out from under Lily's queen-sized mattress. Margaret Montgomery checked on them at 12:30 a.m., finding both girls apparently asleep. What happened after that has been the subject of intense speculation, police investigation, and small-town rumor for years. According to Lily Montgomery's statement to police, she woke briefly at around 2:15 a.m. and noticed Jessica was still in the trundle bed. She fell back asleep and didn't wake again until 8:30 a.m., at which point Jessica was gone. Lily initially assumed Jessica had gone downstairs for breakfast, but when she went down herself, the Montgomerys' kitchen was empty except for Margaret preparing coffee. "Where's Jessica?" Margaret asked, noticing her daughter was alone. "She's not down here?" Lily felt the first stirring of concern. I thought maybe she got up early. They checked the bathroom, the living room, the backyard. Jessica's overnight bag was still in Lily's room, but her phone was missing. Her shoes were still by the front door where she'd left them the night before. At 9:15 a.m., Margaret called Diane Turner to ask if Jessica had somehow gone home. Diane, who had just returned from an overnight shift at the hospital, was alarmed to learn her daughter was missing. She drove immediately to the Montgomery house. By 10:30 a.m., they had called everyone they could think of. None of Jessica's other friends had seen her. She hadn't shown up at home. Her social media accounts showed no activity since the previous evening. At 11:30 a.m., David Montgomery called the police. Officer Thomas Rivera was the first to respond. As was standard procedure, he initially treated Jessica as a possible runaway. Teenagers, especially those from single-parent homes, sometimes took off after arguments or due to school pressure. But several factors immediately troubled him. Jessica had left without her shoes or overnight bag. She had no history of running away or behavioral problems. She had an apparently good relationship with her mother. She had plans for the summer that she was excited about. Rivera upgraded the case to a potential missing person situation and began a more thorough investigation. When he interviewed Lily about their evening, she mentioned the visit from Ryan and Mike. The boys were quickly located at Ridge Point, where they'd been waiting since 11 a.m. for the girls to show up. Both seemed genuinely surprised and concerned when told Jessica was missing. They confirmed talking to the girls through the window but insisted they'd gone straight home afterward. "We can check the security camera at the Wilsons' house," Ryan suggested. "Their camera points at the street, and we walked right past it on our way home." The footage from the Wilsons' security system showed Ryan and Mike walking away from the Montgomery house at 11:12 p.m. and not returning. This seemed to eliminate them as suspects in whatever had happened after 2:15 a.m., when Lily last saw Jessica. As the day wore on, concern deepened. A formal missing persons report was filed. Jessica's description was circulated to law enforcement across Connecticut. Jessica Turner, 16 years old, 5'6", tall, 125 lbs, long brown hair, green eyes, last seen wearing pink pajama shorts and a gray tank top. The first 48 hours of a missing persons case are crucial, and the Millfield Police Department took the situation seriously. They interviewed everyone who knew Jessica, checked surveillance cameras from businesses around town, and began searching areas she was known to frequent. Diane Turner appeared on local news, pleading for information about her daughter. "Jessica, if you can hear this, please come home. Whatever's wrong, we can fix it. If someone has her, please let her go. She's all I have." What troubled investigators most was the lack of any obvious explanation. Jessica had no known enemies. She wasn't involved with drugs or criminal activity. There were no large withdrawals from her bank account, no packed bags, no farewell notes. She'd simply vanished from a friend's bedroom in the middle of the night. 4 days into the investigation, a potential lead emerged. A gas station attendant in Hartford, about 30 miles from Millfield, reported seeing a girl matching Jessica's description at around 5:30 a.m. on Saturday morning. The girl appeared disoriented and asked to use the phone, but left before making a call when another customer entered. Surveillance footage from the gas station was grainy, but showed a girl of similar height and build to Jessica. She was wearing what looked like pajamas with a large dark jacket over them. Her face wasn't clearly visible, but her movements, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear, a habitual gesture Jessica's mother immediately recognized, suggested it could be her. "That's Jessie," Diane said, studying the footage. "The way she moves, the way she stands. That's my daughter." This sighting shifted the investigation. If Jessica had been in Hartford just hours after disappearing from the Montgomery house, how had she traveled the 30 miles? She didn't drive, had no access to a car, and there were no late-night buses from Millfield to Hartford. Someone must have taken her there. Detective Sarah Chen, who took over the case from Officer Rivera, developed a theory. Jessica may have left willingly with someone, but the circumstances of her departure, leaving shoes and belongings behind, suggest it was unplanned or urgent. The timing, middle of the night, is concerning. Chen began looking at everyone who might have had contact with Jessica in the days before her disappearance. Teachers, friends, acquaintances, even delivery people who came to the Turner home. She was particularly interested in adults in positions of trust who might have manipulated a teenager. 2 weeks into the investigation, another possible sighting was reported. A librarian in New Haven thought she'd seen Jessica browsing books. This witness was less certain than the gas station attendant, but the location was significant. New Haven was a college town with easy train access to New York, Boston, and points beyond. Was Jessica running away? If so, why? And why hadn't she contacted her mother? Social media provided no clues. Jessica's accounts remained dormant. Her phone never connected to any network after the night she disappeared. Her email was never accessed again. It was as if she'd stepped off the edge of the world. As summer progressed, the investigation continued, but with diminishing returns. Searches of wooded areas around Millfield turned up nothing. Sex offender registries were checked. Missing persons databases were cross-referenced. Border Patrol and transportation hubs were alerted. Jessica's case received national attention briefly when it was featured on a true crime show. Tips came in from across the country, each followed up diligently, each leading nowhere. Lily Montgomery struggled with guilt and confusion. She was right there, sleeping next to me, she told Detective Chen in her third interview. I don't understand how someone could take her without me waking up. The Montgomery's home was examined thoroughly. Jessica's DNA was found, of course, in Lily's room and the bathroom she'd used. But there was nothing to indicate a struggle, no signs of forced entry. The only unusual element was that the back door was found unlocked the morning after she disappeared, though Margaret Montgomery insisted she'd checked all doors before going to bed. The most disturbing theory, which Detective Chen kept returning to, was that Jessica might have let someone into the house herself. But who? And why, in the middle of the night? 6 months after the disappearance, the case had gone cold. Jessica Turner was now one of thousands of missing teenagers in America, whose fates remained unknown. Diane Turner refused to give up hope. She maintained her daughter's bedroom exactly as Jessica had left it. She continued working her shifts at the hospital, but spent every free moment distributing flyers, updating the Facebook page dedicated to finding Jessica, and consulting with private investigators when she could afford it. She's out there somewhere, Diane insisted in a newspaper interview on the 1-year anniversary of Jessica's disappearance. I'd feel it if she wasn't. A mother knows these things. Life in Millfield slowly returned to normal, for everyone except those closest to Jessica. Lily Montgomery started seeing a therapist to deal with the trauma and survivor's guilt. She reported having the same dream repeatedly. Jessica standing at the window, trying to get back in, mouth moving but no sound coming out. Ryan Peterson and Mike Collins were questioned multiple times, but eventually cleared of involvement. Both graduated from high school and left Millfield for college, eager to escape the whispers and sideways glances that followed them around town. As years passed, Jessica's case was reviewed periodically, but no new evidence emerged. Detective Chen, who had been especially committed to finding Jessica, eventually transferred to a larger department, though she kept in touch with Diane Turner and continued to follow the case unofficially. In the absence of facts, rumors flourished. Jessica had run away to become an actress. She'd been taken by a trafficking ring. She'd discovered her father's identity and gone looking for him. She'd fallen into the river that ran behind the Montgomery property and been swept away. She was living under a new identity in Canada. She'd been murdered by someone in town who would never be caught. Time, as it always does, marched on. The class Jessica would have graduated with received their diplomas. Trees grew taller, buildings were painted. People moved in and out of Millfield. Jessica's friends went to college, started careers, began adult lives. The community's collective memory of the missing girl faded, though never completely disappeared. 7 years passed. Marion Hayes had worked at the Millfield Public Library for over 40 years. At 72, she could have retired long ago, but preferred to keep busy. She knew most of the town's residents by name, and took particular interest in helping students find research materials. On a rainy Tuesday in March 2017, Marion was reshelving books in the rarely visited poetry section when she noticed something unusual. A volume of Emily Dickinson's collected works had been returned with what appeared to be a bookmark sticking out. As she went to remove it, she realized it wasn't a bookmark at all, but a folded piece of notebook paper. Patrons often left odd things in library books: grocery lists, receipts, personal notes. Usually Marion threw these away without a second thought, but something about this paper made her pause. It had been deliberately placed in the center of the book, not haphazardly left behind. She carefully unfolded it and found herself looking at a page torn from what appeared to be a diary or journal. The handwriting was neat, youthful, and hauntingly familiar. Marion had been the one who helped Jessica Turner with her 8th grade poetry project 5 years before she disappeared. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Her hands trembling, Marion read the page. June 4th, 2010. I can't sleep. Lily's out cold, but my mind won't shut off. I found something I wasn't supposed to see, and now I don't know what to do. If I'm right about this, people I care about could get hurt. Really hurt, but if I say nothing, can I live with myself? I've made a decision. Tomorrow morning I'm going to talk to Name Scratched Out. Together we'll figure out the right thing to do. I just hope I'm not making a terrible mistake. The date sent a chill down Marion's spine. June 4th, 2010. The very night Jessica disappeared. After a moment of stunned silence, Marion carefully refolded the page, placed it in an envelope from her desk, and called the police. For the first time in 7 years, there was a new clue in the disappearance of Jessica Turner, and the mystery was about to deepen considerably. Detective James Miller had been with the Millfield Police Department for just over a year when Marion Hayes' discovery landed on his desk. At 32, he was ambitious and thorough, with a particular interest in cold cases. He'd familiarized himself with the Jessica Turner file during his first month on the job, recognizing it as the kind of case that defined a small town's history. Within an hour of receiving Marion's call, Miller was at the library, carefully placing the journal page into an evidence bag. He questioned Marion about exactly how and where she had found it. It was in our 1960 edition of Dickinson's collected works, Marion explained, leading him to the poetry section. Not a book that circulates often, maybe once or twice a year. When was it last checked out? Miller asked, examining the book's circulation card. Marion checked the computer records. 3 weeks ago, to a Benjamin Collins. Collins? Miller's ears perked up. Any relation to Mike Collins? His younger brother, Marion confirmed. Benjamin's a sophomore at Millfield East, writing a paper on American poetry, he said. This connection, tenuous as it was, intrigued Miller. Mike Collins had been one of the last people to see Jessica before she disappeared. Now his brother had checked out a book where a page of Jessica's diary mysteriously appeared 7 years later. Miller took the book as evidence as well, hoping forensic analysis might reveal fingerprints or DNA. He then went directly to interview the younger Collins. Benjamin Collins was 17, gangly and nervous, nothing like his confident older brother. When Detective Miller explained why he was there, the boy seemed genuinely bewildered. I did check out that book, but I didn't put anything in it, he insisted. I barely even opened it, to be honest. I just needed some Dickinson quotes for a presentation. Did you give the book to anyone else? Let someone borrow it? Benjamin shook his head. No one. I returned it last week. Your brother Mike was friends with Jessica Turner, Miller said, watching carefully for a reaction. Benjamin's expression darkened. Yeah, and people never let him forget it. He had to leave town because of all the rumors. He was at college when she disappeared, you know. Had nothing to do with it. Mike wasn't at college when Jessica disappeared, Miller corrected. He was here in Millfield. He and Ryan Peterson were among the last people to see her. Whatever, Benjamin said dismissively. He was cleared. Everyone knows she probably just ran away. Miller made a note of the boy's defensiveness but didn't push further. He had no concrete reason to suspect either Collins' brother, but the coincidence warranted attention. His next step was to show the diary page to those who knew Jessica best. His first stop was Diane Turner's modest ranch house on the east side of town. 7 years had aged Diane dramatically. At 49, her hair was more gray than brown, and deep lines etched her face. But when Miller showed her the diary page, her eyes lit up with hope for the first time in years. That's Jessica's handwriting, she confirmed immediately. She kept a diary from the time she was 12. It was missing from her room after she disappeared. I assumed she'd taken it with her. Did she ever mention finding something concerning? Something that might have put her or others in danger? Diane shook her head. No, nothing. But she was private about some things. Sensitive, you know. Even as a little girl, she worried about others' feelings. The entry mentions planning to talk to someone the next morning. Any idea who that might be? I've been thinking about that since you called, Diane said. If it was something serious, she might have gone to her art teacher, Ms. Delgado. They were close. Or maybe Pastor Allen at our church. Jessica volunteered with him at the homeless shelter. Miller noted both names, though he knew both had been interviewed extensively during the original investigation. Neither had reported Jessica contacting them the day she disappeared. His next visit was to the Montgomery house. David and Margaret still lived in the same Victorian, though Lily had long since moved away to attend college in Boston. The couple seemed surprised by the reopening of the investigation, but willingly answered Miller's questions. "We've gone over that night 1,000 times," David Montgomery said, his academics' precision still evident. Nothing unusual happened. The girls watched movies, went to bed. That was it. There was the visit from those boys, Margaret reminded him. Ryan and Mike. Through the window, David clarified. They never entered the house. Miller showed them the diary page. Jessica wrote about finding something she wasn't supposed to see. Any idea what that might be? The Montgomerys exchanged a glance that Miller found interesting. "We have no idea," Margaret said quickly. "Our house was an open book to Jessica. She'd been visiting since kindergarten. Lily's room looked out over the backyard," Miller said. "Is it possible Jessica saw something from the window? Activity in a neighbor's yard, perhaps?" "Possible, I suppose," David conceded. "But the houses are quite far apart in our neighborhood, and it was dark." Miller left with the distinct impression the Montgomerys were uncomfortable with the diary page's implications, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Next, he contacted Ryan Peterson, now a financial analyst in Hartford. Ryan agreed to meet at a coffee shop during his lunch break. At 23, he was polished and professional, very different from the teenage boy described in the original case files. "I think about Jessica all the time," Ryan said after reading the diary page. "The way everyone looked at us afterward, like we had done something to her. Mike and I lost our whole senior year to that shadow." "The diary suggests Jessica discovered something disturbing the night she disappeared," Miller pressed. "Did she seem troubled when you and Mike spoke to her and Lily?" Ryan considered this. "Not really. She was quieter than Lily, but that was normal. Jessica was always the serious one." He paused, then added, "There was one thing, though. When we were leaving, I glanced back and saw Jessica looking out the window. Not at us, but across toward the woods behind the Montgomery house. She seemed focused, like she'd spotted something. This was new information." "You never mentioned this during the original investigation," Ryan shrugged. "I didn't think it was important. She was just looking out the window. And honestly, after we were cleared, I tried to forget the whole thing." Miller's next call was to Detective Sarah Chen, now with the state police. She drove to Millfield immediately upon hearing about the diary page. "This is significant," Chen said, examining the evidence. "In 7 years, we've had nothing tangible, and now this appears? Someone's playing games. Or someone's finally ready to reveal what they know," Miller suggested. Chen looked skeptical. "Conveniently placed in a library book checked out by the brother of someone connected to the case. That's not coincidence." Together, they decided to interview Lily Montgomery, now a graduate student in Boston. Rather than calling ahead, they drove to her apartment, hoping to catch her unprepared. Lily had grown from a vivacious teenager into a serious young woman. Her reaction to seeing the detectives at her door was telling. Not surprise, but resignation. "I wondered when this would come back around," she said, inviting them in. Her apartment was sparse and organized, bookshelves filled with psychology texts. When shown the diary page, Lily's hand trembled slightly. "That's Jess's writing," she confirmed. "And it sounds like her, always worrying about doing the right thing. You were her best friend," Chen said gently. "If she found something disturbing, wouldn't she have told you?" "Not necessarily," Lily replied. "Jessica was complicated. She kept things to herself sometimes, especially if she thought it would hurt someone. Any idea what she might have discovered? Miller asked. Something in your house, perhaps? Lily's expression became guarded. I've spent 7 years wondering what happened that night. If I knew anything that could help, don't you think I would have said so? They left with more questions than answers. On the drive back to Millfield, Chen shared her thoughts. Lily knows more than she's saying. So do her parents. The question is whether they're hiding something about Jessica's disappearance or something else entirely. Miller nodded. And what about the timing? Why would this diary page surface now after 7 years? The forensic analysis of the book and diary page provided some answers, but raised new questions. There were no fingerprints on the diary page except Marion Hayes, suggesting whoever placed it had worn gloves. The page matched the type of notebook Jessica had been known to use. Handwriting analysis confirmed it was almost certainly written by Jessica. Most intriguingly, the book itself had been checked out 17 times since Jessica's disappearance. Benjamin Collins was the most recent, but the list of previous borrowers included both Mike Collins and David Montgomery. Miller created a timeline on the whiteboard in his office. June 4, 2010. Jessica disappears from Montgomery home. June 5, 2010. Jessica possibly sighted at Hartford gas station. June 18, 2010. Possible sighting in New Haven. September 2012. David Montgomery checks out Dickinson book. February 2015. Mike Collins checks out Dickinson book. March 2017. Benjamin Collins checks out book. Diary page discovered. The connection to the Collins family seemed increasingly significant. Miller went to interview Mike Collins, now working at an insurance company in New Haven. Mike was less polished than Ryan, but equally wary. I don't know anything about a diary page, he insisted. I checked out that book for a college paper years ago. Poetry analysis, that's it. Did you notice anything unusual about the book? Pages that seemed new or out of place? No, nothing. Look, I've spent years trying to put this behind me. People in Millfield still look at me like I had something to do with Jessica vanishing. I didn't. The police cleared me. I have an alibi. The security footage from that night shows you and Ryan walking away from the Montgomery house. Miller acknowledged. But it doesn't account for your whereabouts for the rest of the night. Mike's face flushed. We went home, to bed. My parents were there. They verified it. Miller remained unconvinced but had no evidence to press further. He shifted tactics. Jessica wrote about finding something she wasn't supposed to see. Any idea what that might be? No clue. But knowing Jessica, it could be anything. She was always watching people, noticing things. Too smart for her own good. That phrase, too smart for her own good, had appeared in several interviews about Jessica over the years. Miller wondered what it really meant. His investigation took an unexpected turn when forensic analysis of the diary page revealed a faint impression from whatever had been written on the next page of the notebook. Using specialized lighting, they were able to make out fragments. Can't believe what I saw. Montgomery garage, Ryan's father, weapon. This partial text was tantalizing but frustratingly incomplete. Ryan's father, Peter Peterson, had been interviewed during the original investigation and had a solid alibi for the night Jessica disappeared. He'd been at the hospital for an emergency appendectomy, verifiable by multiple witnesses. Nevertheless, Miller went to speak with him. Peter Peterson, now divorced and living in a small apartment, seemed genuinely surprised by the new evidence. I barely knew Jessica, he said. Ryan brought her and Lily over a few times, but we hardly spoke. Nice kid, quiet, always watching. The diary suggests she saw something concerning in the Montgomery garage, potentially involving you and a weapon. Does that mean anything to you? Peterson's face registered confusion, then understanding, then something like embarrassment. Oh, I think I know what this might be about. But it had nothing to do with Jessica's disappearance. Nothing at all. I'll need you to explain, Miller pressed. Peterson sighed heavily. About a week before Jessica disappeared, I was at the Montgomery's house. David and I were friends then. We played poker together. I'd brought over a hunting rifle I was thinking of selling. David was interested in buying it. A rifle? This was the first Miller had heard of any weapon connection. A Remington 700, completely legal. David has a hunting license. We were examining it in his garage, field stripping it. I wasn't aware anyone saw us. This revelation sent Miller back to the original case files. There was no mention of any rifle or other weapon in the Montgomery house inventory conducted after Jessica's disappearance. He obtained a search warrant and, with a team of officers, returned to the Victorian on Elm Street. David Montgomery was indignant. "This is harassment. That rifle has nothing to do with anything. I decided not to buy it, and Peter took it home." Nevertheless, the search proceeded. No rifle was found, but in the garage, behind a false wall concealed by tool cabinets, officers discovered a hidden room approximately 8 by 10 feet. Inside was a cot, a small desk, and most significantly, dozens of journals, newspaper clippings, and photographs related to Jessica's case. David Montgomery was taken in for questioning. His wife Margaret called their lawyer, who arrived shortly afterward. "I can explain all of this," David insisted. "It's not what you think." "What I think," Miller said slowly, "is that Jessica Turner saw something in your garage the night she disappeared. Something involving a weapon. And now we find a hidden room filled with materials about her case. How would you interpret that, Professor Montgomery?" David closed his eyes. "I've been investigating her disappearance privately. The room is my research space. I couldn't do it in the house because it upset Margaret too much. And the rifle. Peter brought it over, yes. I considered buying it but decided against it. This was before Jessica disappeared. It has no connection to what happened to her." "Then why wasn't it mentioned in your original statements?" "Because it wasn't relevant." David's academic composure cracked. "And because I knew how it would look. A weapon in the house where a girl vanished? But I swear that rifle was never fired, never used for anything. Peter took it home that same day." Miller had Peter Peterson brought in for a second interview and confronted him with David's statement. "Is it true you took the rifle home the same day you showed it to David Montgomery?" Peterson hesitated. "Not exactly. I left it with him overnight so he could think about the purchase. I picked it up the next day. He decided against buying it. Do you still have this rifle?" "No. I sold it about a month later to a man in Massachusetts. I have the bill of sale somewhere." Miller requested the documentation and sent officers to track down the rifle's current owner. If it had been used in a crime, forensic analysis might still reveal evidence, even years later. Meanwhile, Chen had been conducting her own interviews with Jessica's other friends and teachers. Ms. Delgado, the art teacher Jessica had been close to, provided an interesting perspective. Jessica was observant in a way most teenagers aren't. She noticed patterns, inconsistencies. In art, that made her exceptional. She could capture the essence of people, the things they tried to hide. In life, I think it sometimes made things difficult for her. Did she ever mention seeing something that troubled her? Something at the Montgomery house, perhaps? Delgado considered this. Not specifically, but about 2 weeks before she disappeared, she seemed distracted during art club. When I asked what was wrong, she said something like, "Sometimes people aren't who they pretend to be." I thought she was talking about typical teenage drama. This statement, while vague, aligned with the diary page. Jessica had discovered something about someone she knew, something that contradicted their public persona. Further analysis of the materials found in Montgomery's hidden room revealed something unexpected. Among the newspaper clippings were several about other missing girls from neighboring counties, dating back to the early 2000s. Each case involved a teenage girl who disappeared without evidence of foul play. None had been solved. When confronted with these clippings, David Montgomery became defensive. "It's research looking for patterns. These cases could be connected to Jessica's." "Are you suggesting a serial abductor?" Miller asked. "I don't know, maybe." That's what I was trying to figure out. But Chen noticed something Montgomery hadn't explicitly highlighted in his research. In each case, the missing girl had spent time in a home with a significant age gap between the parents. David Montgomery was 15 years older than his wife, Margaret. The investigation shifted again when the rifle was located and examined. Peter Peterson's documentation proved legitimate. He had indeed sold the weapon to a hunter in Massachusetts, who still owned it. Forensic analysis showed no evidence it had been fired at a person or used in any crime. This seemed to eliminate the weapon as a direct factor in Jessica's disappearance, but Miller remained troubled by the diary's implications. If the rifle wasn't the something Jessica had witnessed, what was? A break came from an unexpected source. Benjamin Collins requested a meeting with Detective Miller, arriving at the station visibly nervous. "I know something," he admitted, "but I didn't know it was important until now." "What is it, Benjamin?" "When I took that poetry book home, there was already something in it. Not the diary page you found, but a note. It said to put the page in the book and return it. That doing so would finally bring justice for Jessica." "You had the diary page all along?" Miller asked, incredulous. "No, the note said it would be placed in my locker at school, and it was a few days later in an envelope. I was freaked out but also curious, I guess. So I did what it said." "Why didn't you come forward immediately when we questioned you?" Benjamin looked down. "I was scared. I thought I'd get in trouble, and honestly, I didn't think it was real. I thought it was someone messing with me because of Mike's connection to the case." Do you still have the original note?" "No, it said to destroy it after, so I did." "Can you remember exactly what it said? Who it was from?" "There was no name. It just said that Jessica deserved justice, and this would help. That I was chosen because I was connected but innocent." Miller had Benjamin write out everything he could remember about the note and the circumstances surrounding it. While the boy's story was plausible, Miller remained skeptical. Benjamin could be covering for someone else, or for himself. The new information returned the focus to the Collins family. Miller obtained search warrants for the homes of both Mike Collins and his parents. Nothing incriminating was found, but in Mike's childhood bedroom, now used for storage, they discovered a box of high school mementos that included several photographs of Jessica Turner. "Just group photos," Mike explained when questioned. "School stuff, parties, nothing weird." But one photo stood out: Jessica standing alone by a window, clearly unaware she was being photographed. It had a voyeuristic quality that troubled the detectives. "Ryan took that," Mike said quickly. "He had a thing for Jessica. Even though he was always talking about Lily, everyone knew it." This contradicted the narrative from 7 years ago, where Ryan's interest in Lily had been established. Miller went back to interview Ryan again, this time with the photograph. Ryan's reaction was surprise, then resignation. "Okay, yes, I had a crush on Jessica, not Lily. But Jessica wasn't interested, so I focused on Lily instead. It was stupid teenage stuff." "Did Jessica know how you felt?" "Watching me when she thought I wasn't looking. Like she was trying to figure me out." "Did you take this photograph of her?" Miller showed him the picture from Mike's box. Ryan examined it. "Yeah, I did. At a party at Mike's house, maybe 3 months before she disappeared. She was standing by herself and she looked, I don't know, peaceful, beautiful. I know it seems creepy now, but it wasn't meant that way." "Why did Mike have it?" "I gave him a bunch of photos when I left for college. Didn't want reminders of Millfield." Miller pressed further. "Jessica wrote about finding something she wasn't supposed to see. Could it have been something related to your feelings for her?" Ryan laughed bitterly. "My crush wasn't exactly a state secret, and it certainly wouldn't have been something she'd write about being afraid to reveal." As the investigation continued, the forensic analysis of the hidden room in the Montgomery garage yielded another clue. Among David Montgomery's collection of materials was a newspaper article about Jessica's disappearance that had been annotated in what appeared to be Jessica's handwriting. The article, dated June 8, 2010, 4 days after Jessica disappeared, included a quote from David Montgomery expressing shock and concern. Next to this quote, in the margin, was written, "Liar." This annotation could not have been made by Jessica if she had disappeared on June 5th. The implication was staggering. Either Jessica had survived past the date of her reported disappearance, or someone was going to elaborate lengths to implicate David Montgomery. Jen brought Margaret Montgomery in for another interview, this time focusing on her husband's behavior. Did David ever speak about Jessica in a way that seemed inappropriate? Did she ever express discomfort around him? Margaret seemed genuinely shocked. Absolutely not. David was like a father to Jessica. He helped her with school projects, encouraged her interest in literature. There was never anything inappropriate. Were you aware of his hidden room in the garage? His collection of materials about Jessica and other missing girls? At this, Margaret's composure faltered. "I knew he was researching. Jessica's disappearance hit him hard. He blamed himself for not hearing something that night. for not keeping her safe in our home. When did you first notice this research? A few months after she vanished. He became obsessed with finding her. We all did, in different ways. Chen changed tactics. The diary page mentions Jessica finding something she wasn't supposed to see. Any idea what that might be? Margaret was silent for several moments. There is one possibility, she finally said, but it had nothing to do with David. It was about me. This was unexpected. Go on, Chen encouraged. The week before Jessica disappeared, I had an appointment. Medical. Jessica was supposed to be at art club, but it was canceled. She came home early and found me preparing to leave. I told her I was going grocery shopping, but she must have known I was lying. What kind of appointment? Margaret's eyes filled with tears. I had found a lump. Breast cancer runs in my family. I was scared, didn't want anyone to know until I had answers. The appointment was with an oncologist. And was it cancer? No, benign, thank God. But Jessica might have overheard my phone conversation with the doctor's office or seen the paperwork. If she thought I was seriously ill but hiding it, this explanation was plausible. Jessica, sensitive and concerned for others, might well have been troubled by such a discovery, but it hardly seemed significant enough to warrant her cryptic diary entry or to connect to her subsequent disappearance. The investigation took another turn when the owner of a hardware store in Hartford came forward after seeing a news report about the case. He recalled selling a prepaid cell phone to a teenage girl matching Jessica's description on the morning of June 5, 2010, the same day as the gas station sighting. She seemed nervous, the store owner, Edwin Ramirez, told Miller, kept looking over her shoulder, paid cash, asked where the nearest bus station was. This confirmed Jessica had made it to Hartford alive. The question remained, how and why? Miller obtained records from all bus companies operating out of Hartford in June 2010. Given the passage of time, most had purged their detailed passenger information, but one company's archived schedule showed a bus departing for New York City at 8:15 a.m. on June 5, 2010, approximately 2 hours after the gas station sighting. Meanwhile, forensic analysts made a breakthrough with the diary page. Using specialized techniques, they were able to recover more text from the impressions left by Jessica's writing on the next page. Can't believe what I saw in Montgomery garage. Ryan's father talking to Mr. Montgomery. The weapon wasn't for hunting. They were arguing about money and the arrangement, something about other girls. I took pictures with my phone. Going to show. The name of who Jessica planned to show the photos to was still illegible. But this new information dramatically changed the investigation. It now appeared Jessica had witnessed a conversation between David Montgomery and Peter Peterson that referenced other girls and some kind of arrangement, possibly connected to the newspaper clippings about other missing girls found in Montgomery's hidden room. Both men were brought in for questioning again, this time separately and simultaneously, to prevent coordination of their stories. David Montgomery continued to insist the rifle was innocent, just a potential sale between hunting enthusiasts. Yes, we discussed money. It was an expensive rifle. I ultimately decided I couldn't afford it. And what arrangement would you and Peterson have been discussing? I have no idea. There was no arrangement. Jessica must have misunderstood. Peterson's story was similar, but with a crucial difference. We were talking about the rifle, yes, and an hunting trip we were planning. But there was no argument about money. When pressed about the arrangement and other girls, Peterson became visibly uncomfortable. Look, this has nothing to do with Jessica's disappearance, but David and I were involved in something ethically questionable. We were helping students cheat on college entrance exams. Girls, mainly. Daughters of wealthy families willing to pay for guaranteed admission. This was not at all what the detectives had expected. You were running a cheating ring. Not a ring, exactly. Just occasional consulting. David would get question banks from colleagues at other universities. I had connections at the testing centers. We never thought of it as harmful, just helping kids who needed a boost. This explanation was investigated and partially corroborated. Several former students admitted to paying for testing advantages. But this revelation, while damning for both men professionally, seemed disconnected from Jessica's disappearance. Miller returned to Benjamin Collins, pressing him harder about the mysterious note that had instructed him to plant the diary page. "I need the truth, Benjamin. Every detail you can remember about that note and how you received it." Under intense questioning, Benjamin finally broke down. It wasn't completely anonymous. It was signed LM, I thought. I assumed it was Lily Montgomery. This was a significant development. Miller immediately drove to Boston to confront Lily directly. When presented with Benjamin's statement, she denied involvement. "I never wrote any note. Why would I do that after all this time?" "Perhaps because you know what happened to Jessica," Miller suggested. "Perhaps you've carried that knowledge for 7 years and finally decided to reveal it indirectly." Lily's face paled. "I've spent 7 years in therapy because of what happened. I loved Jessica like a sister. I would never have harmed her." "No one's suggesting you harmed her," Chen said gently, "but you might know who did." After a long silence, Lily spoke. "There is something I never told anyone. The night Jessica disappeared, I wasn't asleep the entire time like I said. I woke up around 3 a.m. and Jessica was sitting by the window with her phone. She said she couldn't sleep and was just playing a game. I went back to sleep. When I woke up at 8:30, she was gone." "Why didn't you tell the police this?" "Because I promised her I wouldn't tell anyone she was breaking the rule about no phones after midnight. It seemed so stupid and trivial after she disappeared. But once I'd lied in my initial statement, I was too scared to change it." This new information suggested Jessica had been awake and active much later than previously thought. Her phone never recovered. Might have contained the photos she mentioned taking of Montgomery and Peterson, evidence of whatever she had witnessed. The investigation now focused on obtaining Jessica's phone records from 2010. Though years had passed, the service provider was able to provide limited archived data, showing Jessica's phone had connected to a cell tower in Hartford at 5:47 a.m. on June 5, 2010, and to another tower in New York City at 10:23 a.m. the same day. The trail went cold after that. Either the phone was turned off or the battery died. But this confirmed Jessica had made it to New York, apparently traveling voluntarily. A canvass of bus stations in New York with Jessica's photo yielded another break. A ticket seller with an exceptional memory recalled a girl matching Jessica's description purchasing a ticket to Montreal, Canada, on the afternoon of June 5, 2010. "I remember because she was so young to be traveling alone," the ticket seller, Maria Gonzalez, said. "I asked if her parents knew where she was. She said she was meeting her father. Jessica's father had abandoned the family when she was 3. According to Diane Turner, she had no contact information for him and had not spoken with him since the divorce. But Jessica might have found him somehow. Perhaps this was connected to what she had discovered." Miller obtained border crossing records from June 2010, and sure enough, Jessica Turner's passport had been scanned at the Canadian border on June 6, 2010. She had left the country legally, apparently of her own volition. But why? And where was she now? The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Ryan Peterson contacted Miller voluntarily, asking to meet privately. "I haven't been completely honest," Ryan admitted. "I didn't take that photo of Jessica, Mike did. He was obsessed with her, had been for years, but Jessica wasn't interested in him that way. Why lie about this? Mike's my friend. I was protecting him. But with all this new evidence, I'm worried he might have been involved somehow in her disappearance." Miller was skeptical. "Mike had a solid alibi for that night. He was on security footage walking home with you, and his parents confirmed he was home all night." Ryan looked uncomfortable. His parents would say anything to protect him, and the footage only shows us walking away from the Montgomery house around 11 p.m. It doesn't show what happened later. This new suspicion of Mike Collins prompted another, more thorough search of his residence. In a storage locker rented under his name, investigators found a box containing women's clothing, some jewelry, and most significantly, a phone matching the description of Jessica's. The phone was dead and obsolete, but digital forensics experts were able to recover data from it, including several photographs taken in the Montgomery garage on June 3, 2010, the day before Jessica disappeared. The images showed David Montgomery and Peter Peterson in conversation, with what appeared to be financial documents spread between them. The rifle was visible, but it didn't appear to be the focus of their discussion. More disturbing were text messages between Jessica and an unknown number in the days before her disappearance. Unknown. I found him. Your father. He's in Montreal. Jessica. How do you know it's really him? Unknown. I have proof. Photos. Address. Everything. I can help you meet him. Jessica. Why would you do this for me? Unknown. Because you deserve to know your real family, and because I care about you. The unknown number was traced to a burner phone purchased with cash. Cell tower data placed it at or near Mike Collins's house when several of the messages were sent. When confronted with this evidence, Mike Collins finally broke down. I didn't hurt her, I swear. I helped her leave. According to Mike, he had become aware of Jessica's desire to find her father. Through online searches and a private investigator he paid with money saved from summer jobs, he had located a man he believed was Jessica's father living in Montreal. I thought if I helped her, she'd see how much I cared, that maybe she'd feel the same way about me. So you helped her run away, without telling her mother, without telling anyone? Mike looked down. She was going to go anyway. After what she saw in the garage, she was scared to stay. I just facilitated it. What exactly did she see? I don't know all the details. She told me Montgomery and my dad were involved in something illegal, possibly dangerous. She had evidence on her phone. She was going to go to the police, but she was afraid of what might happen to Lily if her dad got arrested. This aligned with Jessica's diary entry about being worried people she cared about could get hurt. But it still didn't explain why she ultimately chose to run away, rather than report what she'd seen. Jessica decided finding her dad was more important than exposing whatever Montgomery and my dad were doing. Mike continued. She thought she could start over somewhere new. I helped her plan it, drove her to Hartford early that morning while my parents were asleep. This account was partially corroborated by cell tower data placing Mike's phone in Hartford early on June 5, 2010. But Miller remained suspicious of Mike's version of events. If you were just helping her, why keep it secret for 7 years? Why let her mother suffer, thinking her daughter might be dead? Mike's face crumpled. Because she is dead. At least I think she is. I never heard from her after she left. The plan was for her to contact me once she was settled in Montreal, but she never did. I've spent 7 years terrified that something happened to her because of me, because I helped her leave. With this new information, the investigation expanded internationally. Canadian authorities were contacted to trace Jessica's movements after crossing the border in June 2010. Records showed she had checked into a youth hostel in Montreal, but checked out after just 2 nights. After that, the trail went cold. The man believed to be Jessica's father, Andrew Turner, was located in Vancouver. DNA testing confirmed he was indeed Jessica's biological father, but he denied any knowledge of her attempting to contact him. I haven't seen my daughter since she was a toddler, he said. If she came looking for me in Montreal, she never found me. I moved to Vancouver in 2005. This suggested Jessica had been lured to Canada under false pretenses. Mike Collins had either been mistaken about the man he found or deliberately misled Jessica. The investigation refocused on Mike Collins. A more thorough examination of his financials from 2010 revealed several large cash withdrawals in the months before Jessica's disappearance, totaling over $5,000, far more than a high school student would typically have from legitimate sources. When pressed, Mike admitted to another deception. The private investigator thing was a lie. The money came from my dad. He knew I liked Jessica and suggested I help her leave town. He gave me the cash to give to her for travel expenses. This implicated Peter Peterson directly. He was brought in for questioning again, this time with more substantial evidence against him. Under intense pressure, Peterson finally revealed a disturbing truth. Montgomery and I weren't just helping kids cheat on tests. We were connecting certain girls with wealthy men. Nothing illegal. The girls were all 18 or older. Just introductions, that's all. You were trafficking young women, Chen said bluntly. No, nothing like that. These were college-aged women who wanted to meet successful men. Mutually beneficial relationships. But evidence from Montgomery's hidden room, combined with Jessica's photos and diary entry, painted a darker picture. The arrangement appeared to be a sophisticated recruitment operation, identifying vulnerable young women. including some who were likely underage. The newspaper clippings of missing girls took on new significance. Were these girls who had been introduced to wealthy men and then disappeared? David Montgomery, confronted with Peterson's confession, finally broke. It wasn't supposed to be like that. It started as legitimate tutoring, then mentoring, then introductions. Peterson took it further than I was comfortable with. When Jessica saw us arguing, I think she took photos without us realizing. If she heard enough to understand what we were doing, you would have had a motive to silence her, Miller finished. Montgomery vehemently denied harming Jessica. I would never hurt her. When she disappeared, I was genuinely devastated. That's why I became obsessed with finding her. Guilt, yes, but not because I was responsible for her disappearance. The truth, as it emerged over the following weeks, was complex and disturbing. David Montgomery and Peter Peterson had indeed been operating a companionship service, connecting young women with wealthy clients. They primarily recruited college students, but there was evidence they had approached high school seniors as well. Jessica had discovered their operation and collected evidence on her phone. Rather than confronting them directly, she had confided in Mike Collins, who saw an opportunity to both help Jessica and remove her from what he perceived as danger. Mike, with his father's knowledge and financial support, had helped Jessica plan her escape, even fabricating information about her biological father to give her a destination. Whether he genuinely believed the man in Montreal was Jessica's father remained unclear. Mike claimed he did, but his deceptions made his testimony unreliable. What happened to Jessica after she reached Montreal remained unknown. Canadian authorities found records of her staying briefly at the hostel, but nothing after that. She had withdrawn the cash Mike gave her from an ATM, purchased some supplies from a convenience store, then vanished. Had she discovered the man wasn't her father and gone somewhere else? Had she met with foul play in an unfamiliar city? Had she successfully started a new life under a different identity? 7 years later, these questions remained unanswered. The diary page, it turned out, had been part of Jessica's actual diary, which she had apparently taken with her when she left. How it came to be planted in the library book remained a mystery. Benjamin Collins maintained he had received instructions signed LM, which could indeed stand for Lily Montgomery, though she continued to deny involvement. Another theory emerged when it was discovered that one of the young women allegedly introduced to clients by Montgomery and Peterson was named Laura Mendez, also LM, who had dropped out of college shortly after meeting with them. Her current whereabouts were unknown. As for David Montgomery and Peter Peterson, they were arrested and charged with multiple crimes related to their introduction service, including promoting prostitution and contributing to the delinquency of minors. The investigation expanded to include their clients, several of whom were prominent businessmen and politicians. Mike Collins was charged as an accessory to Jessica's disappearance, since he had actively helped a minor leave home without parental knowledge and cross state lines. His cooperation with the investigation led to a plea agreement with minimal jail time. But for Diane Turner, the most important question remained unanswered. Where was Jessica now? The case had transformed from a mysterious disappearance to a sordid tale of exploitation and deception, but Jessica herself remained missing. Had she been another victim of Montgomery and Peterson's operation, or had she escaped their influence only to vanish for reasons of her own? 7 years after she disappeared, Jessica Turner's ultimate fate remained unknown. But the diary page hidden in a library book had finally exposed the truth about the circumstances surrounding her disappearance, bringing a measure of justice to those who had exploited young women for years. The investigation continued, with authorities in both the United States and Canada searching for any trace of Jessica. Diane Turner, while devastated by the revelations about why her daughter had run away, clung to hope that Jessica was alive somewhere and might one day return. "At least now I know she wasn't taken," Diane said in a press conference. "She made a choice to leave, even if she was misled about where she was going. That means she might have made other choices that kept her safe. Jessica was always smart. Too smart for her own good, people used to say. I have to believe she's out there somewhere using that intelligence to survive." As for the library book that had started the renewed investigation, it was logged into evidence. its pages holding the secret of how Jessica's diary entry had found its way there after 7 years. A mystery that, like Jessica herself, remained unsolved. As the investigation into Jessica Turner's disappearance entered its 8th month since reopening, Detective James Miller found himself at an impasse. The case had expanded far beyond a missing teenager, exposing a network of exploitation that reached into the highest echelons of Millfield society. David Montgomery and Peter Peterson awaited trial, their introduction service dismantled, but Jessica herself remained missing. The diary page had been authenticated, its message clear. Jessica had discovered something sinister and fled out of fear. But whether she was alive today, living under a new identity, or had met with foul play in Canada remained unknown. On a crisp November morning in 2017, Miller received a call from Canada's Royal Mounted Police. A woman in Vancouver had come forward claiming to have met Jessica Turner in a women's shelter in Montreal in late 2010. She called herself Jess Taylor. The woman, Isabelle Durand, told Miller over a video call. She was 17, American, and scared. She said she'd come to Montreal looking for her father but discovered she'd been misled. Did she mention who misled her? Miller asked. A boy back home, someone she thought was a friend. She was angry about it but more focused on survival at that point. According to Durand, Jessica had stayed at the shelter for approximately 3 weeks before finding work as a waitress. They had kept in loose contact for a few months, but eventually drifted apart. The last I heard, around February 2011, she was talking about going to Toronto. She'd saved some money and wanted to take art classes there. This was the first credible long-term sighting of Jessica since her disappearance. Miller immediately dispatched an officer to Vancouver to interview Durand in person, and coordinated with Toronto authorities to search for any trace of Jessica or her alias, Jess Taylor, in their records. While waiting for these leads to develop, Miller focused on the mysterious appearance of Jessica's diary page. The Moore Public Library's surveillance system had been upgraded in 2016, but footage was only kept for 90 days. There was no visual record of who might have placed the page in the Dickinson book. Marion Hayes, the librarian who had found the page, continued to insist it had not been there when Benjamin Collins checked out the book. I always check for bookmarks or damage when books are returned. That page was planted after Ben returned the book, but before I reshelved it. This created a window of approximately 48 hours, during which someone could have accessed the book while it sat on the return cart. Library staff or any patron could have had the opportunity. Benjamin Collins maintained his story about receiving instructions signed LM to plant the diary page, but no note was ever found to corroborate his claim. Lily Montgomery continued to deny involvement, and Laura Mendez, the former college student with the same initials, had seemingly vanished after her involvement with Montgomery and Peterson's operation. The case took an unexpected turn when Diane Turner received a package in the mail with no return address. Inside was a worn, leather-bound journal, Jessica's diary, intact except for the missing page that had appeared in the library book. A note accompanied it. She wanted you to have this. The handwriting didn't match Jessica's, nor did it match samples from any known suspects. Forensic analysis found no usable fingerprints or DNA, suggesting the sender had been careful to avoid leaving evidence. The diary contained entries spanning nearly 2 years before Jessica's disappearance, providing insight into her thoughts and concerns. Most entries were typical teenage reflections, school stress, friendship dynamics, aspirations for the future. But in the months leading up to her disappearance, a darker theme emerged. February 12, 2010. Something weird is happening with Lily's dad. He keeps having these meetings in the garage with different men. Lily doesn't seem to notice or care, but it feels off somehow. March 18, 2010. Saw Ryan's dad at the Montgomery house again today. They didn't know I was there. I came early for study group. They were arguing about money. Mr. M seemed upset. April 29, 2010. Overheard Mr. D. M on the phone talking about new girls and special clients. Started feeling sick when I realized what he might be talking about. Hoping I'm wrong. May 14, 2010. Lily introduced me to her cousin Amber today. She's in college but had to drop out this semester for personal reasons. She seemed jumpy, nervous. When Mr. M came home, she practically ran out of the house. June 3rd, 2010. Confirmed my worst fears today. Saw Mr. M and Mr. Peterson in the garage with files, photos of girls from our school and the community college. They were talking about arrangements and price points. It made me sick. Took photos with my phone as evidence. Then came the final entry from June 4th, 2010, the one whose torn-out page had appeared in the library book. In the diary, the entry continued beyond what had been found. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to talk to Officer Rivera. Together we'll figure out the right thing to do. I just hope I'm not making a terrible mistake. If these men are doing what I think they're doing, a lot of girls could be in danger. But if I'm wrong, I could destroy Lily's family for nothing. Officer Thomas Rivera had been the first responder when Jessica was reported missing. Miller pulled Rivera's personnel file and discovered he had retired from the Millfield Police Department in 2013, moving to Florida shortly thereafter. Miller contacted Rivera, now 70 and living in a retirement community near Tampa. The former officer seemed surprised by the call, but agreed to speak about the case. Jessica Turner, Rivera said, his voice gravelly with age. I remember her well. Beautiful girl, smart as a whip. Her disappearance was my first major case. Her diary indicates she was planning to speak with you the morning she disappeared, Miller explained, about something serious she had discovered. A long pause followed. She never spoke to me, Rivera finally said. By the time I got involved, she was already gone. But why would she specifically plan to talk to you? Did you have a prior relationship with her? I was the school resource officer at Millfield East for several years before moving to patrol. I knew Jessica, like I knew most of the kids. She was quiet, responsible, the type who'd come to an authority figure if she saw something wrong. Miller wasn't satisfied with this explanation. Were you aware of David Montgomery and Peter Peterson's activities? Another long pause. No, absolutely not. If I had been, I would have investigated immediately. Despite Rivera's denials, Miller felt there was more to the story. He arranged to interview the retired officer in person, flying to Florida the following week. Rivera lived in a modest condo decorated with fishing trophies and photos of his grandchildren. He walked with a slight limp, the result of an on-duty injury years earlier. He seemed nervous about Miller's visit, but maintained he had no special connection to Jessica. I honestly can't tell you why she would have singled me out, he insisted. Maybe because I'd helped with the peer anti-drug program at her school. The kids knew they could trust me. Officer Rivera, Miller said, watching his face carefully. Phone records showed Jessica sent a text to your personal cell phone at 11:47 p.m. on June 4, 2010, the night she disappeared. Rivera paled visibly. That's not possible. We have the records. The text read, "Need to talk tomorrow. Important, Jessica T." You never mentioned receiving this text during the original investigation. The retired officer's hands began to shake. I didn't think it was relevant. She never showed up to talk, so I assumed it wasn't important after all. You didn't think a text from a girl who disappeared hours later was relevant? Rivera's composure crumbled. Okay, yes, she texted me. She occasionally reached out about school issues or community concerns. It wasn't unusual. When she disappeared, I wondered if it was connected to whatever she wanted to discuss, but I had no way of knowing what that was. Did you respond to her text? I don't remember. It was 7 years ago. Maybe I said okay or something similar. Miller pressed further. Phone records don't show a response from you. They also don't show any prior text conversations between you and Jessica, despite your claim that she occasionally reached out. This appears to be the only time she ever texted you. Rivera's expression shifted from nervous to resigned. I think I need a lawyer. While Rivera consulted with his attorney, Miller continued investigating the connection. Rivera's financial records showed nothing unusual. No unexplained deposits, no sudden wealth. If he had been involved with Montgomery and Peterson's operation, there was no monetary trail to prove it. However, Rivera's work schedule during his final years in Millfield revealed an interesting pattern. He had frequently logged overtime hours patrolling areas near the community college and other locations where Montgomery and Peterson allegedly recruited young women. More significantly, Rivera had been the responding officer on 2 cases involving young women who later turned out to be connected to the introduction service. In both instances, he had characterized their complaints, one of harassment, one of stalking, as unfounded and closed the cases without thorough investigation. With his attorney present, Rivera finally provided a more complete statement. I wasn't involved in their operation, but I knew something was happening. David Montgomery was a respected professor, a pillar of the community. I didn't have hard evidence, just suspicions. When those girls came forward with complaints, I was pressured to drop the cases. Pressured by whom? Chief Grayson. He was friends with some of the men who used the service. I was told these were delicate matters that could harm the town's reputation if pursued. The former police chief Walter Grayson had died in 2015, making it convenient for Rivera to shift blame to him. But Rivera's admission that he had been aware of potential criminal activity and chosen not to investigate properly was damning. What about Jessica Turner? Miller demanded. Did you know what she had discovered? Rivera shook his head. Not specifically, but I suspected. When I got that text, I was afraid of what she might tell me. Afraid I'd be forced to either properly investigate or become actively complicit in a cover-up. When she disappeared, part of me was relieved. This admission was recorded and added to the expanding case file. Rivera wasn't charged immediately, but he remained under investigation for potential obstruction of justice. Meanwhile, the search for Jessica continued in Canada. Toronto police found records of a Jessica Taylor, who had enrolled in night classes at a community art school in March 2011. Her instructor remembered her as talented but withdrawn, reluctant to share personal details. She had completed the course but declined to enroll in the advanced program, saying she was moving again. By this point, the trail was more than 6 years old. Jessica, if she was still using the Taylor alias, could be anywhere in Canada or beyond. International agencies were alerted, but without a current photo or confirmed identity, finding her would be nearly impossible unless she wanted to be found. Miller returned to the library book puzzle. If Benjamin Collins had been instructed to plant the diary page, who had given those instructions, and why now, after 7 years? A breakthrough came in an unexpected form. Mike Collins, serving his reduced sentence at a minimum security facility, requested a meeting with Miller. I need to tell you something else, Mike said, his prison uniform hanging loose on his frame. About the diary page. What about it? I received a letter about 6 months ago. No return address. Inside was a diary page and instructions to have my brother planted in that specific library book. Why would you do that? And why not tell us this before? Mike looked down. The letter said if I did this, there would be closure for everyone involved. It also said if I didn't, information would be sent to the police about my role in Jessica's disappearance. I was scared. Who sent the letter? It was signed JT, Jessica Turner, I assumed, or someone claiming to be her. This suggested Jessica herself might be orchestrating the revelation of her story from afar. But why now? And why in such a convoluted manner? The diary that had been sent to Diane Turner provided another clue. Forensic analysis of the package discovered a partial fingerprint on the inside of the box. Too incomplete for absolute identification, but similar to Jessica's prints on file. Miller developed a new theory. Jessica had survived in Canada, perhaps built a new life, but for some reason had decided it was time for the truth about Montgomery and Peterson to come out. Rather than returning or coming forward directly, she was orchestrating the investigation from a distance. This theory gained support when Canadian authorities discovered a woman named Jess Taylor had worked at an art gallery in Vancouver from 2013 to 2016. Gallery records included an employee photo showing a young woman with dyed black hair who bore a striking resemblance to an age-progressed image of Jessica Turner. The gallery owner confirmed the woman had left suddenly in late 2016, saying only that she was heading east for family reasons. She had been a reliable employee, artistic and intelligent, but private about her past. As these Canadian leads developed, the case against Montgomery and Peterson expanded. Their introduction service had involved at least 30 young women over a decade, some as young as 17. Several clients were charged as well, including 2 local business leaders, a state politician, and a university administrator. The exploitation ring had tentacles throughout Millfield and beyond. Certain community leaders had enabled it, others had turned blind eyes, and vulnerable young women had paid the price. In this context, Jessica's decision to flee rather than report what she knew made more tragic sense. She had likely feared no one would believe her, or worse, that those with the power to help were already compromised. 9 months into the reopened investigation, another package arrived, this time addressed to Detective Miller himself at the police station. Inside was a USB drive containing multiple files, photos Jessica had taken of Montgomery and Peterson discussing their operation, screenshots of text conversations between Montgomery and various clients, a list of girls they had approached or recruited, financial records showing payments, a video file. The video showed Jessica herself, now 23, with shoulder-length black hair. She sat at a desk in a nondescript room, looking directly at the camera. "My name is Jessica Turner. I disappeared from Millfield, Connecticut on June 5, 2010. I wasn't kidnapped. I ran away after discovering David Montgomery and Peter Peterson were recruiting girls for what amounted to a prostitution ring targeting vulnerable young women. I planned to report what I found to Officer Rivera, but before I could, Mike Collins warned me that Rivera was aware of the operation and possibly protecting it. Mike offered to help me leave town, claiming he'd found my biological father in Montreal. I later discovered this was a lie. My father wasn't there, but by then I was already gone and afraid to return. I've spent 7 years building a new life, looking over my shoulder, wondering if I made the right choice. I'm coming forward now because I recently learned. I've spent 7 years building a new life, looking over my shoulder, wondering if I made the right choice. I'm coming forward now because I recently learned that other girls have continued to be victimized by this network. What I witnessed wasn't isolated, and it didn't end when I left. I have to hope that Millfield is ready for the truth now, when it wasn't 7 years ago. Everything I've sent you is evidence I've collected over the years, including some provided to me by others who were victimized. I'm not ready to reveal my current location or identity, but I am finally ready for justice. Not just for me, but for all the girls whose lives were changed by these men, and the system that protected them." The video ended there, with no indication of where or when it had been recorded. Forensic analysis of the USB drive found no fingerprints or traceable data beyond the files themselves. The package had been mailed from Buffalo, New York, a city with no previous connection to the case. Miller immediately authenticated the evidence on the drive. The photos matched the descriptions in Jessica's diary and clearly showed Montgomery and Peterson with documents and photos of young women. The financial records aligned with bank statements already subpoenaed during the investigation. This was the smoking gun they had been seeking, direct evidence of the operation in the perpetrator's own words and images. More important was confirmation that Jessica was alive, or at least had been when the video was recorded. Miller had the footage analyzed by experts who confirmed it showed the real Jessica Turner, aged appropriately, with no signs of duress or coercion. Diane Turner watched the video in Miller's office, tears streaming down her face. "That's my baby," she whispered. "She's alive. She grew up." The evidence Jessica provided strengthened the case against Montgomery, Peterson, and several others. But it raised new questions about Mike Collins's claim that Officer Rivera was complicit. Had Rivera been actively protecting the operation as Jessica believed, or merely looking the other way out of political pressure, as he claimed? Further investigation into Rivera's activities revealed troubling connections. Rivera's son had attended the community college on a scholarship typically reserved for students with financial need, despite Rivera's comfortable middle-class salary. The scholarship had been approved by an administrator now implicated in Montgomery's network. Additionally, Rivera had purchased a fishing boat in cash shortly after handling one of the complaints he had dismissed as unfounded. The boat's value, approximately $20,000, was difficult to explain on a police officer's salary, especially with college-aged children. When confronted with this evidence, Rivera's story changed again. "I wasn't actively involved," he insisted. "I just looked the other way sometimes, took some money to handle certain complaints discreetly." Luis and I never procured girls or arranged meetings. Did you know Jessica Turner had evidence of the operation? Is that why you didn't mention her text message after she disappeared? Rivera's shoulders slumped. I suspected she might know something. When she disappeared, I thought maybe Montgomery or Peterson had discovered she was gathering evidence and done something to her. But I was too compromised to properly investigate. I'd have incriminated myself. So you let her family suffer for 7 years, thinking she might be dead, when you suspected all along what had happened. I told myself she had probably just run away. It was easier than facing the alternative, that my inaction might have put her in danger. With Rivera's confession, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. Jessica had planned to talk to him, unaware he was compromised. Mike Collins, whose father was involved with Montgomery and Peterson, had somehow learned of this plan and warned Jessica that Rivera couldn't be trusted. This revelation cast Mike's actions in a slightly different light. While he had certainly lied to Jessica about her father being in Montreal, and helped a minor cross state and international borders without parental consent, he might genuinely have believed he was protecting her from a corrupt system. Miller confronted Mike with the new evidence. Jessica claims you warned her about Rivera. Is that true? Mike nodded. My dad mentioned once that Rivera was reasonable and understood the value of discretion. When Jessica told me she was going to take her evidence to him, I panicked. I knew enough about my dad's involvement to be afraid of what might happen if Jessica trusted the wrong person. So you convinced her to run away instead? I gave her options. She chose to leave. I didn't force her. By lying about finding her father? Mike looked away. I knew she'd always wanted to find him. It seemed like the one thing that might convince her to go far away, to stay safe. I figured once she was gone, she could decide for herself what to do next. Miller was troubled by the morality of Mike's actions, but understood the impossible situation he had faced as a 17-year-old. He had made a terrible choice with long-lasting consequences, but perhaps with good intentions. The case against Montgomery, Peterson, Rivera, and others proceeded to trial. The evidence Jessica had provided, combined with testimony from several victims who came forward after the case became public, was damning. Montgomery and Peterson both received lengthy sentences for their roles in the exploitation ring. Rivera pleaded guilty to lesser charges in exchange for testimony against others involved, including former Chief Grayson's role in the cover-up. But Jessica herself remained elusive. Despite confirmed sightings and the video evidence, her current whereabouts were unknown. Miller coordinated with Canadian authorities focusing on the art world where Jessica seemed to have found a place for herself, but the trail repeatedly went cold. Then nearly a year after the diary page appeared in the library book, Marion Hayes made another discovery. A new book had been returned to the library, a collection of essays on starting over, with a note tucked inside addressed to Detective Miller. I'm safe, I'm well. I have a life I've built for myself that I'm not ready to give up. Please tell my mother I love her and I'm sorry for the pain I caused. The evidence I've provided should be enough to bring justice without my physical presence. Perhaps someday I'll be ready to come home, but not yet. J.T. The note was analyzed and confirmed to match Jessica's handwriting. It had been written on paper available at any office supply store, providing no clues to her location. The book had been returned via the library's outdoor drop box overnight, and security footage showed only a hooded figure whose face was never visible to the cameras. Miller considered his options. He could continue pursuing Jessica, potentially forcing her to flee again from the life she had built, or he could respect her wishes, focusing instead on bringing full justice to those who had created the situation that drove her away. After consulting with Diane Turner, he chose the latter. My daughter is alive, Diane said firmly. That's more than I dared hope for most of the past 7 years. If she needs time, I can give her that. At least now I know. The investigation shifted to ensuring all members of the exploitation ring were identified and prosecuted. Jessica's evidence, combined with testimony from Rivera and others who had struck deals, exposed a network that extended beyond Millfield to several neighboring communities. In total, 17 men were charged with crimes ranging from promoting prostitution to sexual assault of minors. 28 young women were identified as victims, each with her own story of manipulation, exploitation, and betrayal by people in positions of authority. The case became a catalyst for reform in Millfield and beyond. The police department instituted new oversight mechanisms and anonymous reporting systems. Schools implemented more robust education about predatory behavior and exploitation. The community began the difficult process of reckoning with the harm that had been allowed to flourish in its midst. Throughout it all, Jessica remained gone, but not forgotten. Occasional reports of sightings came in. A woman resembling her at an art exhibition in Toronto, teaching at a community center in Montreal, selling paintings at a street fair in Vancouver. Each was investigated discreetly, more to ensure her continued safety than to force her return. As the trials concluded and sentences were handed down, Miller found himself reflecting on the strange, winding path of the investigation. What had begun with a diary page in a library book had exposed decades of exploitation and corruption. Justice had been served, yet the central figure in the case remained a ghost, present through her words and evidence, but physically absent. 18 months after the diary page appeared, Miller received a postcard at the police station. It showed a lakeside vista that could have been anywhere in Canada. On the back, in familiar handwriting, was written simply, "Thank you." J.T. Miller placed the postcard in Jessica's file, which now filled several boxes. The case was technically still open, a missing person never located, but everyone involved understood the reality. Jessica Turner wasn't missing. She had chosen to leave. And after learning what she had discovered, and the corruption that might have endangered her had she stayed, it was difficult to blame her. Diane Turner eventually found a measure of peace. She continued working as a nurse and became an advocate for families of missing children and young victims of exploitation. She converted Jessica's old bedroom into a home office, but kept a photo of her daughter on the desk, the last picture taken before she disappeared, along with a printout from the video showing the woman she had become. When asked by reporters if she expected her daughter to ever return to Millfield, Diane's answer was measured. "Jessica will come home when and if she's ready. She's an adult now, with her own life and her own reasons for the choices she's made. I hope someday those choices bring her back to me, but I understand if they don't. Some places hold too many ghosts." Lily Montgomery, after the initial shock of the revelations about her father, completed her psychology degree and began working with victims of sexual exploitation. Her relationship with her father was irreparably damaged, but she formed a closer bond with her mother, who had been as blindsided by David's crimes as everyone else. "I always wondered why Jessica didn't confide in me about what she'd discovered," Lily said in a therapy session that, with her permission, was included in the case file. "Now I understand. She was trying to protect me from the truth about my father. She knew what it would do to me, to my family. That was Jessica, always thinking of others first." Ryan Peterson moved back to Millfield after college, started a non-profit to support at-risk youth, and occasionally assisted Miller with other cases. His insight into the teen dynamics surrounding Jessica's disappearance proved valuable in understanding how a network like Montgomery's could operate undetected for so long. "The adults created a perfect environment for exploitation," Ryan explained. "They built a culture where authority wasn't questioned, where certain men were above suspicion, and where girls were taught that their discomfort was always their problem, never the system's. Jessica saw through it. That's what made her dangerous to them." The Montgomery house, once a respected landmark in Millfield, stood empty for years, its dark history making it unsellable. Eventually, the city purchased the property, and after much debate, converted it into a crisis center for victims of sexual exploitation and trafficking. The hidden room in the garage was preserved as a reminder of how darkness can hide in plain sight. Mike Collins, after serving his sentence, moved to Seattle and worked with organizations dedicated to helping runaways. He never fully reconciled with his father, who served 8 years for his role in the exploitation ring. The Collins family, like many in Millfield, had been irrevocably changed by the revelations that began with a diary page in a library book. As for Jessica Turner, or Jess Taylor, or whatever name she might be using now, her true legacy wasn't her disappearance but the justice her courage eventually brought. She had discovered a terrible truth, been forced to make an impossible choice, and ultimately found a way to expose the corruption while protecting the life she had built for herself. The diary page that had started it all remained in the evidence room at the Millfield Police Department, preserved in an acid-free sleeve. The words, written by a 16-year-old girl on the last night of her old life, had finally accomplished what she had hoped. The right thing had been done, justice had been served, and people she cared about, while hurt by the truth, had been freed from the lies that surrounded them. Miller kept the case file on his desk long after active investigation had ceased. In the world of missing persons, closure was rare, but in Jessica's case, there was a peculiar form of resolution. She wasn't lost. She had deliberately stepped away from a life corrupted by the actions of others. There was a certain power in that choice, a reclaiming of agency that Miller could respect, even as he hoped that someday Jessica might find her way home. 3 years after the diary page appeared, a new art gallery opened in Toronto featuring the work of an emerging artist known only as JT. The paintings, powerful images of young women in various states of confinement and liberation, received critical acclaim. The gallery owner described the artist as intensely private and deeply concerned with themes of identity and freedom. A photograph of the artist, face cleverly obscured by shadow and angle, appeared in a review of the exhibition. Those who knew Jessica Turner well might have recognized something in the stance. The hands, the way light caught blonde hair now grown long and straight. But the woman in the photo inhabited a different world now, one she had created for herself out of necessity and determination. In Millfield, life continued. The library where it all began still stood, its shelves still filled with books containing countless stories, including one that had changed a town forever. Marion Hayes eventually retired, but not before training her replacement to always check returned books carefully, because sometimes, between the pages, truth waits patiently to be discovered. 5 years had passed since a page from Jessica Turner's diary appeared in a library book, exposing a network of exploitation and corruption that had festered beneath Millfield's placid surface for decades. The courthouse square now featured a memorial garden dedicated to survivors of sexual exploitation. The plaque read simply, "For those who were not heard, and for those who found their voices, truth persists." Detective James Miller, now Millfield's chief of police, had kept his promise not to actively pursue Jessica Turner. Instead, he focused on implementing reforms that would make the town safer for vulnerable youth and women. The exploitation ring had been dismantled, its perpetrators serving lengthy sentences. The victims had received some measure of justice and support for rebuilding their lives. But ghosts from the past have a way of returning when least expected. On a cold February morning in 2022, Miller arrived at his office to find an envelope on his desk. Inside was a gallery invitation. Reclamation. New works by JT. Toronto Arts Collective opening reception, February 25, 2022. A handwritten note on the back read, "It's time, if you still care about closing this case properly." The handwriting matched Jessica's. Miller knew immediately what this meant. After 5 years of respecting her wishes to remain hidden, she was finally ready to be found. He called Diane Turner immediately. At 54, she had rebuilt her life around her nursing career and advocacy work, but the hope of seeing her daughter again had never faded. "I need to go slowly," Diane said, her voice trembling. "If it's really her, if she's really ready, I can't rush this." Miller agreed to go to Toronto first to confirm Jessica's identity and intentions before Diane made the journey. He traveled alone, staying in a small hotel near the gallery. The exhibition was already garnering attention in the local art scene, with reviews praising JT's unflinching examination of identity and trauma. The opening night was crowded, the gallery buzzing with critics, collectors, and the curious. Miller moved through the space studying the paintings. Powerful, sometimes disturbing works depicting young women in cages, behind masks, emerging from darkness into light. The technical skill was impressive, the emotional impact undeniable. And then he saw her, across the room. Jessica Turner had grown into a poised 28-year-old woman. Her blonde hair, now with subtle red highlights, was pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wore a black blazer over a white shirt, professional but understated. As she spoke with admirers and collectors, her smile never quite reached her eyes until she noticed Miller. Their gazes met across the crowded gallery. Jessica gave a small nod, then returned to her conversation. The message was clear. Wait. Hours later, after the crowd had thinned, she approached him. "Detective Miller," she said, her voice deeper and more confident than in the video she had sent years earlier. "Thank you for coming." "It's Chief Miller now," he replied with a small smile. "You've been busy." "So, I've heard. Millfield's youngest police chief. Congratulations." They moved to a quiet corner of the gallery, away from the few remaining guests. Jessica seemed both nervous and resolved, like someone who had rehearsed a difficult conversation many times. "I'm ready to come back," she said directly. "Not permanently, but to finish what I started, to close the loop." "Your mother will be overjoyed," Miller said. "She's never given up hope." Jessica's composure faltered for a moment. "How is she?" "Well, strong. She's become an advocate for families of missing children. She'd love to see you." "I know. That's part of why I'm ready now. I've been following her work from a distance. She's extraordinary." Jessica explained that she had built a life for herself in Toronto under the name Jessica Taylor, not technically an alias as she had legally changed her name in Canada. She had earned a degree in fine arts, established herself as an artist, even formed real friendships and relationships. "But I'm living a half-life," she admitted, "always hiding part of myself, always afraid of being found. I want to be whole again." They arranged for Diane to come to Toronto the following weekend. Jessica wasn't ready to return to Millfield yet, but agreed to give a formal statement about her disappearance and the events leading up to it. "There are still pieces of the story no one knows," she told Miller. "Things I've never told anyone." Before they parted, Jessica asked about others from her past: Lily, Ryan, Mike. Miller filled her in on their current lives, the ways they had been shaped by her disappearance and the subsequent revelations. "And Mike Collins?" she asked with particular interest. "I've wondered about him often. He lied to me, but I think he also saved me." "He served 14 months for his role in your disappearance," Miller explained. "Now works with runaway youth in Seattle. He's never fully explained why he helped you leave, beyond claiming he thought you were in danger." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "There's more to that story. I'll explain when I give my statement." 3 days later, in a private room at Miller's hotel, mother and daughter reunited after 12 years of separation. Diane, shaking with emotion, held back at first, afraid to overwhelm Jessica. But Jessica crossed the room quickly and embraced her mother. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know what else to do." The reunion was tearful, joyful, and complicated. Both women had changed significantly in the years apart. Diane had become more assertive, more politically active. Jessica had developed an independence and resilience that sometimes bordered on detachment. "I understand why you left," Diane said as they sat close together on the sofa. "After learning about Montgomery and Peterson and the corruption in the police department, I'd have been terrified too." "It wasn't just fear," Jessica admitted. "It was shame, guilt. I felt responsible somehow, like I should have seen it sooner, reported it sooner. Maybe other girls wouldn't have been hurt if I'd spoken up earlier." "You were 16, Diane reminded her. "The adults failed you, not the other way around." Over the next few days, Jessica gave a comprehensive statement about her disappearance and subsequent life. Much of it aligned with what the investigation had already uncovered: her discovery of Montgomery and Peterson's exploitation ring, her plan to report it to Officer Rivera, her decision to flee after learning Rivera might be compromised. But there were new revelations as well. "Mike Collins didn't just warn me about Rivera," Jessica explained, her voice steady as Miller recorded her statement. "He showed me evidence that his own father was deeply involved in the network. Photos, messages, financial records. He'd discovered it months earlier but was too afraid and confused to know what to do. So when you told him what you'd found, he panicked, thought I'd go straight to the police and his father would be arrested. He was torn between protecting his family and doing the right thing. So he came up with a third option: help me disappear by lying about finding your biological father." Jessica nodded. "He knew how much I'd always wanted to find my dad. He used that desire to manipulate me, yes. But I think he genuinely believed he was saving me from danger. The diary page that appeared in the library book, was that your doing? Indirectly. I sent it to Laura Mendez, another victim of Montgomery's operation who'd managed to escape. She'd been hiding in Buffalo when she reached out to me, through an online support group for missing persons. She agreed to help expose them without revealing either of our locations. And the instructions to Benjamin Collins? That was complicated. I needed someone connected to the original events but innocent enough to be believable. Benjamin was young when I disappeared, just a child, but his brother's involvement made him a perfect conduit. The most surprising revelation concerned Jessica's initial days in Canada. She hadn't simply fled Millfield on a panicked impulse. She had evidence that Montgomery's network extended internationally, with connections to operations in Montreal that trafficked young women throughout Canada. I thought I could find proof, expose the entire network, she explained. I was 16, idealistic, thought I could be some kind of teenage detective. Instead, I almost got caught by their Canadian associates. That's when I realized how dangerous the situation really was. She had gone underground, changed her appearance, worked cash jobs, and moved frequently. It took nearly 2 years before she felt safe enough to settle in Toronto and begin building a real life. The art saved me, she said, looking at her hands, expressing what I couldn't say directly, creating beauty from trauma, finding myself in the process. With Jessica's statement now on record, the final pieces of the case could be properly closed. The exploitation network had been more extensive than initially understood, with international connections that explained the extraordinary efforts to conceal its operations in Millfield. This new information prompted additional investigations in Canada, resulting in several arrests connected to trafficking operations in Montreal. Jessica's evidence, combined with her testimony, provided remotely, helped prosecutors build cases against individuals who might otherwise have escaped justice. As for Jessica herself, she agreed to visit Millfield briefly, just long enough to see her childhood home, meet with a few key people from her past, and bring formal closure to her status as a missing person. I can't stay, she told her mother. My life is in Toronto now, my career, my friends, my partner, but we can build a relationship across that distance. I'm not hiding anymore. Diane accepted this with grace, grateful for the chance to know her adult daughter, rather than forever mourning her teenage one. They arranged regular visits, video calls, a new kind of family connection adapted to their unusual circumstances. Jessica's return to Millfield was kept quiet, but news inevitably spread in the small town. She stayed just 3 days, long enough to complete necessary legal procedures and brief, careful meetings with those most affected by her disappearance. Her meeting with Lily Montgomery took place in the public library, neutral ground with significance to them both. The women had once been inseparable friends. Now they were careful strangers, each shaped by the other's absence. I used to blame myself, Lily admitted. Thought if I'd woken up when you left, I could have stopped you or gone with you. I'm glad you didn't, Jessica replied. You needed to be here, to build your own life, and I needed to find mine elsewhere. Did you ever think about contacting me, just to let me know you were alive? Jessica looked down. Many times, but it would have put you in an impossible position, keeping my secret from your family, from the police. I couldn't ask that of you. They parted with a careful hug, not the easy embrace of their youth, but something new and tentative, a connection that acknowledged both their shared past and their separate journeys. Ryan Peterson met with Jessica at the Memorial Garden downtown. He had prepared for this meeting for years, imagining what he would say if given the chance. I've wanted to apologize, he began, for not seeing what was happening, for being so caught up in teenage drama while something so much darker was going on. You were 17, Jessica reminded him. We all were, just kids in over our heads. Ryan had thrived in the years since Jessica's disappearance, channeling his guilt and regret into meaningful work with vulnerable youth. Jessica, studying him as they walked through the garden, saw a man who had been fundamentally changed by her absence, perhaps for the better. Your paintings, he said hesitantly. They're extraordinary. Painful, but extraordinary. Art speaks truths we can't always put into words, she replied. It's been my way of processing everything. Will you ever come back permanently? To Millfield, I mean. Jessica shook her head. This place will always be where I'm from, but never where I belong. Too many ghosts. Her final meeting, and perhaps the most difficult, was with Mike Collins. He had flown in from Seattle specifically to see her, to explain himself face to face after 12 years. They met at Ridge Point, the overlook where they had planned to meet the morning she disappeared. A full circle moment that was lost on neither of them. I rehearsed what I'd say if I ever saw you again, Mike said, his voice tight with emotion. Practiced it for years. Now I can't remember any of it. You lied to me, Jessica said directly. About my father, about a lot of things. Yes, but you also probably saved my life. Mike looked surprised at this assessment. I hope so. That's what I've told myself. That if you'd gone to Rivera or confronted Montgomery directly. I was naive, Jessica acknowledged. Thought evidence and truth would be enough. Didn't understand the reach of their network or how dangerous they might be if cornered. I'm still sorry, Mike said, for the way I did it, for not finding a better way. We were kids, making impossible choices with limited information. They talked for hours, filling in the gaps in each other's understanding of what had happened that night and in the days that followed. Mike explained that his father had alerted Montgomery after learning Jessica had evidence, setting in motion the events that led to her flight. Dad thought they'd just intimidate you, maybe pay you off, Mike said. I was terrified they'd do worse. That's why I moved so quickly, why I created the whole story about your father. Jessica nodded, understanding now the full complexity of what had occurred. In a twisted way, your father's criminality saved me from whatever Montgomery was planning. Irony at its finest. As sunset approached, casting long shadows across Millfield below, Jessica felt a sense of closure she hadn't expected. The town looked smaller now, less significant, a chapter in her life rather than its defining narrative. What will you do now? Mike asked. Go home, to Toronto. Continue painting, telling stories through art, living my life. And all this? He gestured toward the town. The past? Jessica considered the question carefully. The past is never really past. It shapes us, haunts us sometimes, but it doesn't have to define us. I'm Jessica Turner and Jessica Taylor. Both are real. Both are me. Her time in Millfield concluded with a private dinner at Diane's house. Just mother and daughter, reminiscing about the good times before everything went wrong, and cautiously building bridges toward a shared future. My exhibition tours to New York next month, Jessica told her mother. Maybe you could visit? See my work in a proper gallery setting? Diane's eyes lit up. I'd love that. And maybe when you're ready, you could meet your half-siblings. Mark's children are curious about their big sister. Step by step, Jessica said with a small smile. I'm not very good at family yet. Still learning. As Jessica prepared to leave the next morning, Miller came to say goodbye. In his car was a file box containing all the original documentation of her case. Reports, interviews, evidence logs, photographs. Officially, you're no longer missing, he told her. Your case is closed. But I thought you might want to keep this. It's your story, after all. Jessica looked at the box, momentarily overwhelmed by the physical representation of what her disappearance had meant. The years of investigation, the resources expended, the lives changed. Thank you, she said, accepting the box, for never giving up, for following the evidence where it led, even when it was uncomfortable. That's the job, Miller replied simply. Finding truth. Truth is complicated, Jessica observed, especially when it's buried in library books and hidden rooms. They shared a quiet understanding, two people who had been fundamentally changed by the strange, winding path of this case. Miller had risen from detective to chief on the strength of his work exposing Millfield's corruption. Jessica had transformed from frightened teenager to accomplished artist through her journey of survival and self-discovery. As Jessica's car pulled away, Miller reflected on the nature of missing persons cases. Most never reached such definitive resolution. Many families spent lifetimes wondering, hoping, grieving without closure. Jessica's case, for all its complexity and darkness, had at least provided answers, even if they weren't the ones anyone had expected. Back in Toronto, Jessica added the box of case files to her studio. Some of the documents would likely inspire future artwork, transmuting the clinical language of police reports into visual explorations of trauma and resilience. The diary page that had started it all, now returned to her possession, held a place of honor in her workspace, a reminder of the 16-year-old girl who had been brave enough to see the truth and eventually find a way to tell it. In the years that followed, Jessica built a bridge between her two lives. She maintained her professional identity as JT, a rising star in the North American art scene, while gradually reconnecting with her past as Jessica Turner. Diane visited regularly. They spent holidays together, built new traditions, found ways to acknowledge the lost years without being defined by them. Jessica even returned to Millfield occasionally, brief visits for specific purposes, never staying long enough for the ghosts to gather. She donated artwork to the Survivors Center that had replaced the Montgomery House, contributed to scholarship funds for young artists, maintained careful, healing connections to the place that had both formed and nearly destroyed her. Her story became part of Millfield's history, taught in local schools as a case study in institutional failure and eventual accountability. The library where it all began installed a small plaque. Truth hides in unexpected places, waiting for those brave enough to see it. As for the book that had held Jessica's diary page, the collected works of Emily Dickinson, it was eventually removed from circulation and preserved in the library's special collection. The page where Jessica's message had been hidden contained a poem that seemed, in retrospect, prophetically appropriate. Tell all the truth, but tell it slant. Success in circuit lies too bright for our infirm delight. The truth's superb surprise. As lightning to the children eased with explanation kind, the truth must dazzle gradually, or every man be blind. Jessica Turner had told her truth slant, through a torn diary page, through evidence left behind, through art created under a different name. The truth had indeed dazzled gradually, revealing itself in fragments over years rather than in one blinding moment. And in that gradual revelation, both justice and healing had become possible. Not perfect, not complete, but real. Lives had been changed, systems reformed, silence broken. From one girl's courage and one diary page hidden in a library book, truth had found its way into the light, rippling outward to touch countless lives in ways that continued to unfold.